Hello, everybody. I am very excited to show you today another vintage electronic toy that I recently got. This is Radio Shack Astro Thunder, and it was made in 1986, although there's a bit of an asterisk there, which I'll explain in a bit. This is yet another of the many toys made in the 1970s and 1980s based on a vacuum fluorescent display. And a lot of you guys know I love vacuum fluorescent displays. I especially love toys with vacuum fluorescent displays. But this vacuum fluorescent display based toy is a bit different from all the others I have. All the other ones you guys have seen that I have, and one that I'm going to show in the future too, they're all variations of Pac-Man. Well, this is very different from that. This is a game based on another genre that was really popular in toys and video games of the era. Space shooters. This is a space shootery type game. Now, space shootery type games are not necessarily my jam, but I wanted one of these, and there's a very specific reason why. This is technologically one of the most impressive vacuum fluorescent display based games that I've ever seen. It's very impressive from a technical standpoint. The display, the design of the display and the design of the gameplay is very impressive. But what's extremely unique about this particular toy, it's the only vacuum fluorescent display based game that I know of that plays waveform audio sound effects. All of these, they just use a piezo buzzer that makes bleepy bloopy noises. This thing actually plays waveform audio sound effects. This thing actually has two microcontrollers in it. It's got the standard issue 4-bit microcontroller that runs the game and pretty much everything. But then it's got a second microcontroller that's actually 16-bit, so way more powerful than the main microcontroller. And the sole purpose of this microcontroller is to play the sound effects. It has a wavetable of sounds stored in ROM, and the main microcontroller just commands it to play a specific sound on command. Very, very cool. I don't know of any other vacuum fluorescent display games like that. There were other ones that used a second microcontroller to produce special sounds, but not waveform sounds. Those ones, a good example is Entek's Turtles and Entek's Defender. They have a second microcontroller that can play like two square wave tones at the same time, and it also has a noise generator. Pretty simple stuff. This thing actually plays waveform sound effects from a wavetable, and that's really cool. So I got this for a really good price. I paid $25 for it, shipped. And I got it for a good price because the seller said that some of the controls didn't work and the sound didn't work. And I knew right away that all of those were probably going to be dirty switches or dirty buttons or whatever. However, interestingly, when I put batteries in this thing for the first time and powered it on, it all worked perfectly. All the controls worked and the sound works. I didn't have to do anything to this thing. I did open it up. I did clean all the controls, but out of the gate, this thing was just fine, and that's really cool. Cosmetically, it's also in good shape as well. I didn't have to do anything to it. I did do one thing to it. You can see the display screen here, and another thing that's really cool about these, there's actually this magnifying Fresnel lens in front of it. The actual display tube is almost impressively small. It's only like that big maybe, so like probably like that big, and the display or this lens magnifies it quite a bit, and it looks really good. Anyway, this lens was scratched up quite a bit, so I just took Novus plastic polish to it, and it came out very nicely. And I've played this quite a bit since I got it, and despite space shootery things not really being my jam, I actually really enjoy playing with this. It's very fun, and that's probably helped greatly by the fact that they put such a large amount of effort into the design of the game and the experience you have when you're using the toy. It's just very impressive, and yeah, I get a lot of enjoyment out of playing with this thing. So let's start by just hooking our eyes onto it and taking a look. So one of the first things you notice is that it's got what appears to be two speakers, like stereo sound, and indeed it's got two switches, right sound on and off, left sound on and off. First of all, the fact that you can actually mute the sound on this is really cool. But what's the deal with the stereo speakers and stuff? Well, first of all, these are entirely decorative. The sound-making devices are actually in the back. There's actually two noise-making devices in here that do different duties. The waveform audio that I mentioned earlier is actually output through the right noise-making device, and that's controlled through this switch. And then there's actually a piezo buzzer separate from that, dedicated to just playing music. And that music is just square wave tones generated by the main microcontroller, and that's controlled by this switch here. So yeah, one sound making device for music, another for the sound effects. You can control them independently or mute the entire thing altogether. That's pretty darn cool. You got your power switch. Select is just to select the level of difficulty before you start. There's 3 levels of difficulty, and then your start button. You got your fire button right here to fire your lasers. And then you've got a 4-way joystick here. You'll mostly use it for just left and right to move your spaceship left and right on the screen to steer. But up and down you have H and L, and that's literally high and low speed. When you go into low speed, it'll only stay there for a few seconds, and any enemies on the screen will kind of like back up. It's almost like you're backing up from them. So maybe if you get overwhelmed, you can go into low speed and sort of get a couple of seconds of reprieve. Or if you really just want to go gung-ho, you can put it into high speed, and once again, it only stays in there. It only stays in high speed for a couple of seconds. So really, you'll mostly just be using this to go left and right. And that's your controls. It's a pretty, despite the relatively high complexity of the game, it's very simple to play, very, very easy to learn. If we go around the back here, or around the side rather, just look how big this thing is. This is pretty darn big. In fact, I'll bring my Coleco Pac-Man over. And of course, the Coleco wins in height, but in length and especially width, this thing is pretty chonkers. It's pretty impressive. Here's the back. And on the bottom, yep, missing the battery cover again. I do have one coming. There is someone on eBay who 3D prints the battery covers and sells them for a reasonable price. 4 C-cell batteries feed this thing. And we do have an instruction sticker. It was catalog number 60-2197. This is the ultimate game of space warfare, complete with twin speaker sound effects. Your spaceship is engaged in 5 accelerating phases of combat with the enemy. Your energy supply is limited. Use it wisely during battle, whilst avoiding encounters with the barrages of asteroids and walls of radiation. If you have the energy and skill to reach Phase 6, you can blow up the enemy base to earn a new supply of energy. A perfect game is 1,000 points. Turn it on, select the skill level, blah blah blah. Game ends when you've lost all your energy units or you have scored 1,000 points. Custom manufactured in Japan for Radio Shack, a division of Tandy Corporation. 785. Oh, I didn't notice this until now. So my unit was actually made in 1985, late 1985. That makes sense. So I told you there was a bit of an asterisk with when this thing was made. So here's the thing. Radio Shack sold a lot of vacuum fluorescent display-based toys. I don't think they made any of them. In fact, I'm pretty certain they never made any of them. And this one is no exception. This was made by a Japanese company called Epoch. Epoch made quite a few games, and I think they were all often sold by other companies. This toy was sold by Epoch as Astro Thunder 7 in Japan. They also marketed it under the name Galaga X6. Same exact thing, just different name on the sticker. In Great Britain, Grandstand sold this under the name Firefox F7. And then we here in North America got Radio Shack Astro Thunder. So, Radio Shack only sold these for 1 year. This is listed in the 1986 catalog. And that is the only Radio Shack catalog that you will find this in. So, you can imagine my surprise when I opened this thing up and there were 1983 date codes on the microcontrollers. And indeed, 1983 is the year when Epoch actually introduced this thing. So what that tells me is that Epoch made this thing for probably just a couple of years, and then when they stopped selling it and Grandstand stopped selling their version, Epoch probably had a stock of these left over, and Radio Shack was probably willing to buy them up cheap, list them in the 1986 catalog, and get rid of them. And the reason I'm pretty confident in that theory is because 1986 was past the end of the era of vacuum fluorescent display based toys. I don't think hardly anybody was still making them by 1986. Certainly this was the only vacuum fluorescent display based toy listed in the 1986 Radio Shack catalog. By 1986, LCD was the law of the land. The VFD stuff was old and expensive and primitive. But yeah, they sold this in 1986. Mine's got 1983 date codes, so that tells me that either complete units or at least the parts were kind of just sitting on Epoch's shelves, and Radio Shack was willing to buy them and sell them off. Very interesting. And Astro Thunder was not the only toy that was sold like this. In the 1987 catalog, Radio Shack sold another toy made by Epoch. It was called Astro Command, a bit simpler than this unit. And I'm pretty sure that it is the last vacuum fluorescent display-based toy ever sold new. 1987. And once again, Astro Command was designed in 1983. By Epoch. That's when they started selling it. So very, very interesting indeed. And it makes it all the more impressive to me because I was already impressed by how technologically advanced this thing is in the grand scheme of vacuum fluorescent display based toys. But now knowing that it was designed in 1983 and not 1986, it makes it even more impressive. So I'll show you some pictures I took when I was inside this thing. This thing is pretty easy to service, very easy to open up, and the first thing you're greeted with is some very unique manufacturing choices, purely to aid in delivering, a visually high quality and visually pleasing product. First thing you're greeted with is this curved card that sits over the display, and it provides all of these, fun little graphics that when you look through the lens of the unit, you can actually kind of make out. And there's also this purple filter that sits in front of the display. That purple filter serves to shift the colors just a little bit, namely the teal phosphor portions of the display are shifted more towards a very light teal, almost a gray color, and it looks very nice. Once you remove that card, it just kind of slides out. You can see how small the display really is. That magnifier does a really good job of making it seem way bigger than it actually is. And here's the Epoch logo silk screened onto the PCB, and here are the microcontrollers. You got the big main microcontroller that contains the game programming. It drives the display. It handles the control I/O, and it also makes the bleep bloop noise for the music side of the sound output. And it was made by NEC. All of these toys used microcontrollers made by either NEC or Hitachi. And the big reason they were so popular is because they can directly interface with a vacuum fluorescent display. You just have to make the power supply to generate like 24 volts or 30 volts DC, feed that power supply directly into the microcontroller, and then the pins on the microcontroller can just directly connect to the display. Made it very easy to make a vacuum fluorescent display based electronic device back in the day. And then you have the smaller microcontroller to the side. That's the one that's actually way more powerful, and it contains the sound effects stored in ROM that it plays out the other sound making device. Now, speaking of the sound making devices, I talked about how a piezo buzzer is used for the music. I haven't talked about what's used for the sound effects, because I originally assumed that a small full range speaker was what I was going to find for generating the sound effects. Makes sense, right? Well, I was blown away when I discovered that what generates the sound effects is actually a really huge piezo buzzer with a thick, clear plastic cone sitting on top of it. We saw something like this with the Coleco Pac-Man, where a plastic cone was sat on top of a piezo buzzer to amplify it. And I found personally that it increased the bass response as well. Well, with this toy, the same thing's being done. And I'm surprised that it works so well, because we're not simply pushing square wave tones through this piezo buzzer. We're pushing waveform audio, pulse code modulated audio. But apparently a piezo buzzer can do the job, or at least a really giant piezo buzzer like this is, that has a cone on top of it. I suppose it kind of makes a tweeter style speaker. So very, very interesting. I was very surprised when I found that. Now, naturally, this thing is pretty darn loud. I did go ahead and modify it to be a bit quieter. I inserted resistors in both sound channels. For the music side, 50 kiloohms. For the sound effects side, 4.7 kiloohms. I think I want to make the music a little louder. I think I made it a little too quiet, so I'll switch that out for maybe 10 or 20 kiloohms at some point. But yeah, there's your look inside of this thing. Let me put some batteries in it, and I'll fire it up. I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll have a go at playing it. And I actually have some period correct batteries, if you can believe it. These GE NiCad batteries, they still work, and they're almost 40 years old. Alright, I'm going to start by just turning the unit on. We are greeted with some fanfare, and look at this. And listen to those sound effects. As soon as you turn the unit on, you just have to look and listen to know that this thing was designed with a bit more effort than a lot of these were. You're greeted with this almost 3D looking playfield. You've got that sonar sound effect, which just sounds so cool. Super impressive technologically for something designed in 1983. And this display is beautiful. It's got 3 colors on it, no filtering, it's all phosphors. You've got the natural teal color, you've got red you can see, and then you've got this beautiful dark saturated blue that this is the first of my VFD toys that has this phosphor on it. Definitely not common. And what we're looking at right now, it's not even a demo mode, it's just an attract mode. It's just showing you pretty things that they just programmed in for the heck of it. And it's so cool to just sit and watch and listen. Very, very pretty display. And in a moment, this thing will show you something else that I find technologically very impressive. Look at this. Do you notice something? First of all, this beautiful graphic at the top, which is like the boss enemy, like the mothership. Notice the detail gone into that. It uses all 3 phosphor colors, mostly that almost exotic dark blue. That just looks so cool, so pretty. But did you notice how it faded in? This thing actually uses pulse width modulation to gradually fade in that graphic. It starts off dim and then it gets brighter. Very, very cool, very unusual. Not unique like the waveform audio, however. Tomitronic's Alien Attack actually uses the same effect on a fancy graphic that it has in its display to represent the boss enemy. And I would really like an Alien Attack someday, but they go for stupid amounts of money on eBay. That game was also sold as Scramble. I think Scramble was the name used in North America. I'd love to have one someday. But yeah, that's something that does, and this does it too. Very, very cool. Just the extra effort they went into. So I could literally watch this attract mode all day. And the fact that you can mute the sound means that you could plug this thing into power. I didn't show it, but it does have a barrel jack, 6 volt center negative for external power. You could just leave this thing turned on with the sound muted, and it would be a pretty cool decoration. So, if I hit the select button, that goes between the 3 difficulty modes, with one being the easiest. On the higher difficulties, you can see everything moves faster. The enemies are also more aggressive, and there are more enemies on the screen at one time. I'm just going to play on easy mode, and let's just start. How cool is that? That's my energy meter. And now what I need to do is shoot the enemies that come at me. And I need to not hit these sidewalls. These blue sidewalls are radiation walls, and they'll hurt me if I go all the way into them. Like that. So, the markers right here and right here, the blue and red markers in the middle on the sides, those show where enemies need to be for your shots to hit them. If they're higher or lower than that, the shots won't hit them. Like that. You'll notice above my energy meter is a little F indicator. That means that I'm on the first half of my available energy. If this meter runs all the way out, that F will turn into an E, which tells me that I'm on the second half of my energy. You'll notice we had a bit of classical music playing. And what's happening now is these are asteroids flying by, and I need to not hit them. Or at least Radio Shack says they're asteroids. I think the other versions of this game say that it's magnetic radiation, which makes more sense because of that buzzing noise. Now, you may wonder what these numbers in the corners are and the meter on the left. Those make up my score. We have a blatant rip-off of Star Wars music. We're in phase 3 now, where the enemies are actually shooting at me. Oops, I got hit. So the number at the top left is the hundreds place of my score. The number at the top right is the tens place, and the meter on the left is the ones place. So I currently have 56 points. An absolutely unnecessarily esoteric way to display the score, but it looks cool, and that's why they did it. Oops. Oh gosh, that hurt me a lot. Ooh, there's the mothership, or the enemy energy base, I believe it's called. More classical music. Oof. I'm not doing very well. I'm doing terribly. I'm now on the second half of my available energy. Son of a gun. And we are moving on to phase 5, I think this is, which is similar to phase 1, but now they're going to be shooting at me. I just went into low speed mode to make them back off. Uh-oh. I'm almost dead. I broke 100 points. Oh, here's the final phase. We get that fade in effect again. Uh-oh. Got it. Awesome. And the game starts over at phase 1, but now things go a bit faster. So let's just see how far I get. Uh-oh. And that is it. It goes back into the attract mode with our final score shown. 205 points. That was a pretty good run. I think my highest so far is like 300 something. Man, what a game. Very cool design. The display design is awesome. The sound design is just very, very cool and very unique. I want to show something. You can't see it right now, but if I iris up here, you'll notice a very cool effect of the Fresnel lens in which everything on the screen has sort of a light streak that goes towards the center of the screen. I don't know if that was an intended effect or not, but it looks very cool. Yeah, no, this is pretty cool. I didn't expect to be... I bought this mostly for the cool factor because of how technologically cool it is. I didn't expect to enjoy the game as much as I end up enjoying it. It's very cool. I know I keep harping on the sound effects, but they add almost a haunting quality to it. You know, especially like the explosion sound effect, you know, mixed with that red flickering on the display. There's almost something haunting about it. Just very, very cool. What a toy. Gosh, you know, it's hard to believe that when I was a kid, we didn't have things like this. We got stupid little LCD stuff that was just the lowest effort crap from McDonald's Happy Meals and stuff. Now, mind you, when I was a kid, we had the Nintendo Game Boy, which was just a boon compared to stuff like this. But back in the era before things like the Game Boy, stuff like this was just top-notch. Generation X really had it cool with some of their toys. Well, that is all there is to show of Radio Shack Astro Thunder from 1985. Definitely one of the coolest vacuum fluorescent display based toys that I have seen so far, and I am really happy to have one. Not only does it just look so cool and sound so cool, it's actually really fun to play. Epoch definitely put a healthy amount of effort into designing this thing. And for a $40 toy in 1986 or 85, this would have made any kid who bought it very happy, I am sure. And now, 35 years later, I'm really happy I have this one. Definitely a worthy addition to my collection of vacuum fluorescent display based games. And I hope you guys enjoyed looking at it with me today. I really thank you a lot for watching. And I want to mention something that I didn't mention in my video of the Coleco Pac-Man, although I meant to. The Coleco Pac-Man, this thing, and another vacuum fluorescent display based game that I'm going to show in a future video, all three of these were more or less paid for by my Patreon subscribers. I save my Patreon money and I use it solely to buy things that I know that I can put back into the channel by making videos about them that I think a lot of people would like to watch. So their support is just greatly appreciated. It really helps. It helps lessen the guilt on clicking that buy it now button on things like this that I really just don't need ever, but just kind of want. So this and the Coleco and what I'm going to show you in the future, they were more or less made possible by my Patreon supporters, so I'm very thankful to them. To everyone else, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi, baby. You're so tiny. You're super young. Aren't you cute? Hey, Mama. Cute.